I was preparing dinner when a police officer knocked on my door. Your husband was in a fatal car accident an hour ago. It was impossible. No, he's upstairs asleep. The officer looked confused. I led him upstairs to our bedroom. Officer drew his weapon. He said. Step away from her. That isn't. But let me start from the beginning, because what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about my life. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me where you're from, because this story reaches deeper than geography. It's about the lies we tell ourselves when love blinds us to the truth. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and for 8 years, I believed I was living the American dream. I met David Chen when I was 29, working as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup in Austin, Texas. He was 32, charming in that quiet, thoughtful way that made you lean in closer to hear what he had to say. David worked in finance for a medical device company, made good money, drove a sensible Honda Civic, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We met at a friend's barbecue on a scorching July afternoon. I remember the exact moment because David walked up to me while I was standing alone by the pool, feeling awkward and overdressed in my sundress while everyone else wore shorts. He handed me a cold beer and said, "You look like someone who's calculating the exact moment it's socially acceptable to leave." He was right. I had been. That first conversation lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears about getting older and still not knowing what we wanted to be when we grew up. David told me he'd grown up in Houston with traditional Chinese-American parents who expected him to become a doctor or engineer. Finance was his compromise. I told him about growing up in a small town in New Mexico with a single mother who cleaned houses to put me through college. If you've ever met someone who felt like home from the first conversation, you know what I'm talking about. Hit that subscribe button because this story is going to take you through every emotion you've ever felt about love and betrayal. 6 months later, David proposed during a weekend trip to Fredericksburg. Nothing fancy, just the two of us at a small bed and breakfast, drinking wine on the porch while watching the sunset. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. I said yes before he finished asking the question. We married the following spring in a small ceremony at Zilker Park. My mother flew in from Albuquerque, his parents came from Houston, and about 40 of our closest friends gathered under the oak trees. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace and a dress I'd found at a vintage shop on South First. David wore the navy suit he'd bought for job interviews, and when he saw me walking toward him, he cried. That was the man I thought I married. David Chen, who remembered I liked my coffee with exactly 1 sugar cube, not 2. David, who would drive 40 minutes out of his way to get tacos from the food truck we'd discovered on our second date. David, who held my hand during scary movies and let me pick the restaurant every Friday night, even though he hated sushi. We bought a house in Cedar Park, a 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard where we planned to raise kids someday. David painted the living room the exact shade of sage green I'd torn out of a magazine. I planted a garden with tomatoes and basil and wildflowers that attracted butterflies. We adopted a dog from the shelter, a golden retriever mix we named Benny, who slept at the foot of our bed and had an unfortunate habit of stealing socks. For 5 years, our life looked perfect from the outside. David left for work every morning at 7:30 sharp, kissed me goodbye, and came home by 6. We had dinner together most nights, watched Netflix on the couch, took Benny for walks around the neighborhood. Weekends meant farmers markets and hiking trails and lazy Sunday mornings in bed. But somewhere in year 6, things started to shift. David began working late more often. He'd come home after 9, claiming budget meetings and quarterly reports. His phone started buzzing at odd hours, texts he'd glance at and dismiss as work emergencies. When I asked about his day, his answers became shorter, more vague. I told myself it was normal. Marriages go through phases. People get busy, distracted. I threw myself into my own work, got promoted to senior marketing manager, started traveling more for conferences and client meetings. We were ships passing in the night, but that happens to couples, right? You weather the storms and come out stronger. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday night in October. I came home from a 3-day conference in Dallas to find David asleep on the couch, his laptop open on the coffee table. He'd been working late again, or so I thought. As I bent to close his laptop, I saw he'd been browsing vacation rentals in Galveston. Romantic beachfront cabins for two. My heart did this little skip. Maybe he was planning a surprise for our anniversary, which was coming up in a few months. I closed the laptop without looking further, not wanting to spoil whatever he had planned. 2 weeks later, David announced he had to work in Houston for a long weekend. Some big client presentation that required his entire team's presence. He'd be gone Friday through Monday, staying at the Marriott downtown. I decided to surprise him. Saturday afternoon, I drove to Houston with a cooler full of his favorite snacks and a bottle of wine, planning to take him to dinner at this Italian place we'd discovered on our honeymoon. The hotel clerk looked confused when I asked for David Chen's room number. "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name registered." I spelled it 3 different ways. Showed them my ID to prove I was his wife. Nothing. David Chen had never been registered at that hotel. He wasn't at any of the other hotels I called either. When David came home Monday evening, tanned and relaxed, I confronted him. He had an explanation ready. The company had switched to a different hotel at the last minute, someplace outside the city limits. He seemed genuinely confused about why the Marriott would have told me he wasn't registered. Maybe they'd made a mistake. These things happen. I wanted to believe him. God, how badly I wanted to believe him. The lies started piling up after that, small inconsistencies that nagged at me like a splinter under my fingernail. David said he was playing golf with his co-worker Jim, but Jim called the house looking for him. David claimed his phone had died during a client dinner, but I could see on our phone bill that he'd been texting someone until midnight. David told me he had to work late on our anniversary, then came home smelling like unfamiliar perfume with a hastily purchased bouquet from a gas station. Each time, he had explanations. Each time, I chose to believe them. Because what was the alternative? That the man I'd loved and trusted for 8 years was lying to my face? That our entire marriage was built on deception? That I'd been too naive, too trusting, too comfortable in my perfect little life to see what was happening right in front of me? By December, I wasn't sleeping well. I'd lie awake next to David, listening to his breathing and wondering who he'd been texting. I'd study his face in the morning light, searching for signs of guilt or remorse, but David looked the same as always. Peaceful. Content. Like a man with nothing to hide. The breaking point came 3 days before Christmas. David said he had to work late, again, and wouldn't be home until after 10. I decided to bring him dinner at his office, partly out of kindness and partly, if I'm honest, out of suspicion. The building was dark. The security guard told me no one from David's company had been there past 6 o'clock. In fact, most of them had left early for the holiday party. Holiday party. David's company holiday party, which he told me was cancelled due to budget cuts. I sat in my car in that empty parking lot, holding a container of David's favorite Thai food and finally admitting to myself what I'd known for months. My husband was having an affair. My perfect marriage was a lie. And I had no idea what to do about it. When I got home that night, David's car was already in the driveway. I sat in my Honda for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to figure out how to walk into that house and pretend everything was normal. How do you look at someone you love and act like you don't know they're lying to you? How do you smile and ask about their day when you know they weren't where they said they'd be? I found David in the kitchen, heating up leftover pizza and scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I walked in, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Guilt? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Hey, babe. How was book club? Book club. I told him I was going to book club, which met on Tuesday nights at the library. It was Thursday. Fine, I said, watching his face carefully. We discussed the ending of that thriller everyone's been reading. Cool. David turned back to his phone, already losing interest. This was new too, The way he'd stopped really listening to me, stopped asking follow-up questions about my life. When had we become strangers living in the same house? I made myself a cup of tea and sat across from him at the kitchen island. How was your day? Still working on that big project? Yeah, it's been intense. Probably going to be pulling late nights for the next few weeks. He didn't even look up from his phone. The client is really demanding. Which client is this again? MedTech Solutions. I think I mentioned them before. He hadn't. I'd been keeping track. That night, while David showered, I did something I'd never done in 8 years of marriage. I went through his phone. I knew his passcode. It was our anniversary date, which felt like a cruel joke now. His text messages were mostly work-related, nothing suspicious. But when I checked his call log, I found something that made my stomach drop. 3 calls to a number I didn't recognize, all lasting over an hour. The most recent was from that afternoon, while he claimed to be in meetings. I wrote down the number and put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. The next morning, after David left for work, I called the number. Hello. A woman's voice, soft and slightly sleepy. I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. There was a woman. Of course there was a woman. But hearing her voice made it real in a way that all my suspicions hadn't. I spent the day in a fog, mechanically going through the motions of work while my mind raced. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Did she know about me? Or was David feeding her the same lies he'd been telling me? That evening, I did more detective work. I checked our credit card statements online, looking for charges I didn't recognize. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Dinner at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges in cities David had never mentioned visiting. Jewelry purchases from stores I'd never heard of. Jewelry that had certainly never made its way to me. And flowers. So many flower purchases, always on days when David had claimed to be working late or out of town for business. The most damning evidence was a charge from 3 weeks earlier, 2 tickets to a concert in Dallas. David had told me he was working that weekend. I remembered because I'd asked if he wanted to go to my cousin's birthday party, and he'd said he couldn't because of this important client presentation. He'd been in Dallas, all right. Just not for work. I printed everything out and hid the papers in my home office, in a file folder labeled insurance documents that I knew David would never look at. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what I planned to do with the evidence. If you're watching this and thinking I should have confronted him right then, you're probably right. But when you love someone, when you've built a life with them, when everything you thought you knew about yourself is tied up in that relationship, it's not that simple. I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept thinking there had to be some explanation that would make all of this make sense. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been in a situation like this. How do you handle it when your entire world is crumbling and you're the only one who knows? The breaking point came 2 weeks later. David announced he had another business trip, this time to San Antonio. He'd be gone Thursday through Sunday, staying at the Hilton Riverwalk for a medical device conference. I waited until he left Thursday morning, then I called the Hilton. No David Chen registered. No medical device conference scheduled that weekend. This time, instead of confronting him with another lie he'd smoothly explain away, I decided to follow him. I called in sick to work and drove to San Antonio. It's only an hour and a half from Austin, but it felt like the longest drive of my life. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to think. What was I hoping to accomplish? What would I do if I actually caught David with another woman? I didn't have answers to those questions, but I couldn't stop myself. I started with the hotels on the Riverwalk, showing David's photo to desk clerks and asking if he was registered. The 4th hotel I tried was the Omni, and the clerk's face lit up with recognition. Oh yes, Mr. Chen. He's in the Riverview suite with his wife. Lovely couple. They've been coming here for their anniversary for the past 3 years. Their anniversary. Their fucking anniversary. My legs almost gave out. I had to grab the edge of the marble counter to steady myself. Their anniversary. Yes, They always request the same suite. Very romantic, overlooking the river. Would you like me to call up to their room? No. The word came out as a whisper. No, that's okay. I wanted to surprise them. I stumbled out of that hotel lobby and somehow made it to my car before I completely fell apart. I sat in the parking lot of a Starbucks and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. 3 years. David had been bringing another woman to San Antonio for 3 years, telling her it was their anniversary, playing house in a hotel suite while I waited at home like an idiot. I drove back to Austin in a haze, my eyes swollen from crying, my chest tight with a pain I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a complete and total betrayal of everything we'd built together. David hadn't just cheated on me, he created an entire alternate life with someone else. When I got home, I went straight to my office and pulled out all the evidence I'd been collecting. Credit card statements, phone records, hotel receipts. I spread it all out on my desk and really looked at the timeline. The affair had started almost 3 years ago, right around the time David had begun working late and traveling more. Every business trip had been a lie. Every late night at the office had been a date with her. Every time he'd come home and kiss me hello, he'd been fresh from being with another woman. I felt sick. Actually, physically ill. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. But underneath the nausea and heartbreak, something else was growing. Something cold and sharp and focused. Rage. David thought he was so smart, so careful with his lies. He thought I was too trusting, too naive, too comfortable in my little suburban life to notice what was happening right under my nose. He'd been treating me like a fool for 3 years, and I'd played the part perfectly. But I wasn't going to play it anymore. That night, when David called to tell me about his day at the conference, I listened to every lie with new ears. He described sessions he hadn't attended, colleagues he hadn't seen, meals he hadn't eaten. He told me he missed me and couldn't wait to get home. He said he loved me. I told him I loved him too, and for the first time in our marriage, I was lying. When David came home Sunday evening with a small gift, a charm bracelet from a Riverwalk shop, I thanked him and put it on. I even posted a photo of it on Instagram with the caption, "My sweet husband always brings me the perfect gifts from his business trips. #lucky wife #love. But inside, I was already planning my revenge. I became a different person after San Antonio. From the outside, I was still Rebecca Chen, dutiful wife and marketing professional. I still made David's coffee in the morning, still kissed him goodbye, still asked about his day when he came home. But inside, I was calculating, planning, documenting everything. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Margaret Torres, and she came highly recommended by a divorce attorney I'd found through a Google search I'd immediately deleted from my browser history. Margaret was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of no-nonsense manner that made me trust her immediately. We met at a coffee shop in Round Rock, far enough from Austin that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I slid a manila folder across the table containing everything I'd gathered, credit card statements, phone records, hotel receipts, dates and times of David's supposed business trips. Margaret flipped through the documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen it all before. "How long have you suspected?" 3 years of lies that I know about, I said. But honestly, looking back, I think it might have started even earlier. "And you want to know who she is?" It wasn't a question. Margaret had seen this before, the wife who needs to put a face to her betrayal, who needs to understand exactly what she's been competing against without knowing she was in a competition. "I need to know everything," I told her. "Who she is, where she lives, what she does for work, how they met, how long it's been going on, whether she knows about me." Margaret quoted me a price that made me wince, but I didn't hesitate. I had my own savings account, money I'd been setting aside for the landscaping project David and I had been planning for next spring. That money was about to serve a very different purpose. "One more thing," Margaret said as she slipped the folder into her briefcase. "Are you planning to divorce him?" I didn't answer right away. Divorce felt like admitting defeat, like letting David win. He got to have his cake and eat it too, a wife at home and a girlfriend on the side, and all I got was a broken marriage and a legal battle. I don't know yet, I finally said. I need to understand what I'm dealing with first. Margaret nodded like she'd heard that answer before too. Give me 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of normalcy while my mind raced with possibilities. Who was she? Was she younger than me? Prettier? Funnier? What did she have that I didn't? What had David told her about me? Did she think I was the evil wife who didn't understand him, or did she not know I existed at all? David, meanwhile, continued his routine of lies with breathtaking casualness. He had another business dinner that Thursday. I could smell her perfume on his shirt when he came home. He worked late on Friday night. I drove by his office building and his car wasn't there. He had to run errands on Saturday morning, errands that apparently took 4 hours and required him to turn his phone off. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to live with someone who's betraying you, it's like being slowly poisoned. Every kiss feels contaminated. Every "I love you" sounds hollow. Every shared moment feels like a performance you're both giving, but only one of you knows you're acting. Leave me a comment and tell me, have you ever had to pretend everything was fine while your world was falling apart? How did you get through it? Margaret called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. Can you meet me tonight? I have everything you asked for. We met at the same coffee shop, but this time Margaret had brought a thick folder and a laptop. She opened it to a photograph that made my breath catch in my throat. She was beautiful. That was the first thing I noticed, not in an obvious, flashy way, but in a soft, natural way that made my chest tighten with insecurity. Dark hair in loose waves, kind eyes, a genuine smile. She looked like the type of woman who rescued stray cats and volunteered at animal shelters. She looked like someone I might have been friends with under different circumstances. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She was 34, 2 years younger than me. She worked as a nurse at Methodist Hospital in San Antonio, which explained why all of David's business trips had been there. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Southtown district, drove a white Toyota Camry, and had no idea that David was married. How can you be sure she doesn't know? I asked. Margaret clicked through more photos on her laptop. I've been following her for the past week, and I found her social media accounts. Look at this. Elena's Instagram was full of photos of her and David. David holding her hand at a farmer's market. David kissing her cheek at a restaurant. David with his arm around her at what looked like a friend's wedding. And the captions. Oh, the captions destroyed me. 2 years with this amazing man and I still can't believe how lucky I am. My boyfriend surprised me with a weekend getaway to the coast. How did I get so lucky? Date night with my favorite person. 3 years together and he still gives me butterflies. 3 years. She thought they'd been together for 3 years, which meant David had been telling her the same anniversary date he'd been using for their hotel reservations. He'd managed to convince her that their relationship had started at the exact same time he'd started lying to me. But the worst part, the detail that made me physically nauseous, was a photo from 6 months ago. Elena in a hospital bed, pale and weak, with David sitting beside her holding her hand. The caption read, "Thank God for this man. When I had my appendectomy, he never left my side. I don't know what I would have done without him." 6 months ago, David had told me he was in Houston for a week-long client presentation. He'd called me every night, complaining about how boring the meetings were, how much he missed me, how he couldn't wait to get home. Meanwhile, he'd been in San Antonio playing devoted boyfriend to a woman recovering from surgery. "There's more," Margaret said gently. She'd been watching my face, probably recognizing the look of a woman whose world was imploding. "They are not just dating. They're living together on weekends. Elena thinks he travels for work during the week, which is why she only sees him Thursday through Sunday." Living together. David had essentially created 2 separate lives, 2 separate identities. Monday through Wednesday, he was Rebecca's husband. Thursday through Sunday, he was Elena's boyfriend. And somehow, he'd managed to maintain this elaborate charade for 3 fucking years. What about marriage? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Has he proposed to her? Margaret hesitated, and I knew the answer was going to hurt. She posted about it last month. He gave her a promise ring. She thinks they're going to get engaged soon. A promise ring. While he was still married to me, David was making promises to another woman about their future together. I closed the laptop because I couldn't look at any more photos of my husband playing house with someone else. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I might throw up right there in the coffee shop. What do you want me to do with this information? Margaret asked. That was the question, wasn't it? I had everything I'd asked for: proof of David's affair, the identity of the other woman, evidence that this wasn't just a fling but a full-blown double life. Now what? I could confront David, demand explanations, fight for my marriage. But fight against what? Against Elena, who was just as much a victim of David's lies as I was. Against David's carefully constructed fantasy where he got to be 2 different people. I could expose everything, send Elena the proof that David was married, destroy his perfect double life in one devastating blow. But that felt cruel. Elena hadn't done anything wrong except fall in love with a man who'd lied to her from day one. Or I could plan something bigger. Something that would give David exactly what he deserved for 3 years of elaborate, calculated betrayal. I need some time to think, I told Margaret. I paid her the remaining balance of her fee and walked out of that coffee shop with a folder full of ammunition and no idea what to do with it. But as I drove home, one thought kept circling through my mind. David thought he was so clever, so careful, so good at managing his double life. He thought he had everything under control. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I spent 3 sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, Margaret's folder hidden in my office like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed yet. Every time I looked at David, reading the morning news, brushing his teeth, falling asleep next to me, I felt this strange disconnect, like I was looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. On Thursday night, while David was supposedly at another late client dinner, which I now knew was actually date night with Elena, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront David. I wasn't going to send Elena anonymous emails with proof of his lies. I wasn't going to take the moral high road and quietly file for divorce, letting David spin some story about how we'd grown apart to save face with our friends and family. No. David had spent 3 years playing games with my life, treating me like a pawn in his elaborate deception. It was time to play a game of my own. But first, I needed help. I called my sister Carmen in Phoenix. Carmen is 5 years younger than me, works in cybersecurity for a tech company, and has never liked David. She'd always said there was something about him that felt too polished, though she'd never been able to put her finger on what bothered her. I need you to fly to Austin, I told her. And I need you to help me destroy my husband's life. To Carmen's credit, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "What did that bastard do?" and booked a flight for the next morning. Carmen arrived Friday afternoon looking like she was ready for war. Black jeans, combat boots, and the kind of determined expression that had gotten her through 2 computer science degrees and a career in a male-dominated field. She hugged me tight in the airport pickup lane and said, "Okay, tell me everything." We went to a bar in East Austin where the music was too loud for anyone to overhear us, and I laid out the whole story. The lies, the business trips, the credit card charges, Margaret's investigation, Elena's Instagram posts. Carmen listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "That fucking sociopath. 3 years. And he's been coming home to you every week like nothing happened. Every Monday through Wednesday, like clockwork. And this Elena woman has no idea. None. She thinks he travels for work. She posts about missing him during the week and being excited for their weekend reunions." Carmen drained her beer and signaled for another. "So what's the plan? Please tell me we're not just going to put sugar in his gas tank or something basic like that." This is why I'd called Carmen. She thought like me, but bigger. More creative. More thorough. I want to expose him, I said. But not just to Elena, and not just to me. I want everyone to know exactly who David Chen really is. I want his co-workers to know, his parents to know, our friends to know. I want him to have to face consequences for once in his life instead of just smooth-talking his way out of everything. Carmen leaned forward, interested. Go on. David's company is having their annual conference next month. It's a big deal. Clients, partners, everyone from the industry. David's been working on a presentation for months, talking about how it could make or break his promotion. And Elena works weekends at an urgent care clinic in San Antonio. But she has vacation days saved up. What if she decided to surprise her boyfriend at his big work conference? What if she drove to Austin to be his supportive girlfriend, not knowing that his wife would be there too, playing the role of supportive wife? Carmen's eyes lit up. Public humiliation. I like it. But how do we get Elena to Austin without tipping her off about what she's walking into? This was the part I'd been working on all week, the detail that made me feel both brilliant and slightly sick to my stomach. Elena posts everything on social media, right? She loves documenting their relationship. What if someone created a fake account and started following her, liking her posts, building up a rapport? Someone who claims to work for David's company and accidentally lets slip when and where the conference is happening? Someone who mentions how much David talks about Elena at work, how he'd probably love to have her there. Social engineering, Carmen said, nodding approvingly. Classic. But it has to be subtle. If Elena gets suspicious and mentions it to David, the whole thing falls apart. Which is why I need you. You understand how people think online, how to build trust without seeming suspicious. I'm too emotionally invested to pull this off without making mistakes. We spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. Carmen would create a fake LinkedIn profile for a fictional employee of David's company, someone in a different department who would realistically know about the conference but not know David well enough to realize he was married. She'd start following Elena's social media accounts, engage with her posts, gradually build up to a friendship. Meanwhile, I would play the perfect wife. I'd be extra attentive to David, more affectionate, more supportive of his work. I'd make sure he had no reason to suspect that I knew anything about his double life. The last thing we needed was David getting paranoid and changing his patterns. What happens after the conference? Carmen asked as we paid our tab. After Elena shows up and finds out David's married? After everyone at his company sees the explosion? I'd been thinking about that too. David will try to manage it. He'll claim it was all a misunderstanding, that Elena was just a friend who got the wrong idea. He'll paint himself as the victim of some crazy woman's obsession. And Elena will be devastated. But she'll also be free. She'll finally know the truth about the man she's been wasting 3 years of her life on. And you? That was the question I didn't have a complete answer for yet. What did I want after I'd destroyed David's carefully constructed world? What did revenge actually get me besides satisfaction? I want David to feel what I felt, I said finally. I want him to know what it's like to have your entire life revealed as a lie. I want him to face consequences for once instead of just moving on to the next woman. Carmen nodded like that made perfect sense to her. When do we start? Now. Tonight. David's in San Antonio until Sunday, which gives us the weekend to set everything up. We drove back to my house, and Carmen set up her laptop at the kitchen table. Within an hour, she created a fake LinkedIn profile for Jessica Williams, a marketing coordinator at David's company. Jessica had a professional headshot purchased from a stock photo site, a realistic work history, and connections to several real employees of David's firm that Carmen had found through their public profiles. The key, Carmen explained as she worked, is to make Jessica seem real but forgettable. Someone Elena might interact with online but not remember clearly enough to describe to David. We want her to blend into the background of Elena's social media life. While Carmen built Jessica's fake identity, I went through my own social media accounts, cleaning up any evidence that might contradict the story we were about to tell. I removed photos where David's wedding ring was visible, hid posts about our anniversary, changed my relationship status from married to blank. By Sunday night, when David came home from his weekend with Elena, everything was in place. Carmen had already started following Elena on Instagram and had liked several of her posts. Jessica Williams was a real person in Elena's digital world, someone who'd complimented her scrubs in one post and wished her luck with a difficult patient in another. David walked through the door at his usual time, 8:30 on Sunday evening, looking relaxed and happy in a way that used to make my heart warm. Now it just made me angry. He'd spent the weekend playing house with another woman, and he had the audacity to come home to me looking content. How was Houston? I asked, kissing his cheek like the dutiful wife I was pretending to be. Exhausting, but productive. I think the presentation went really well. Another lie, so smooth and casual. David wasn't even trying anymore. He probably figured I was too stupid or too trusting to question him. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning every word in a way he'd never understand. You work so hard. You deserve all the success you get. And he was about to get exactly what he deserved. Carmen extended her stay in Austin for another week, telling her boss she was dealing with a family emergency. Which, in a way, she was. We'd positioned her laptop permanently on my kitchen table, and she turned manipulating Elena into a full-time job. She's incredibly sweet, Carmen told me Tuesday evening, scrolling through their latest exchange. Jessica complimented her new haircut, and Elena wrote back this long message about how she's trying to look nice for her boyfriend's big work presentation. She even asked Jessica if she thought the boyfriend would like her new dress. The boyfriend. Elena couldn't even use David's name in casual conversation with someone she thought was his co-worker. After 3 years together, she was still referring to him like he was some prize she'd won rather than the lying bastard he actually was. What did Jessica say? That any man would be lucky to have someone so supportive, and that she's sure he appreciates having Elena in his life. Carmen showed me the message thread on her phone. I'm building up to mentioning the conference. Slowly. We can't seem too eager. Watching Carmen work was like watching a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Every message was carefully crafted to seem genuine while steering the conversation exactly where we needed it to go. She'd like Elena's posts at realistic intervals, comment on her stories about work stress and weekend plans, gradually establish Jessica as a friendly acquaintance who cared about Elena's life. Meanwhile, David continued his routine of lies with clockwork precision. Monday through Wednesday at home with me, Thursday through Sunday with Elena in San Antonio. He'd even started bringing me small gifts on Monday evenings, coffee from that place I liked, flowers from the grocery store, a book he'd seen and thought I'd enjoy. Guilt presents, I realized now. David's way of managing his conscience while he continued to live his double life. But here's the thing about living with someone who's betraying you while you plan their destruction. You start to see them differently. Every gesture David made, every word he spoke, every expression that crossed his face became something to analyze and dissect. Was he genuinely tired, or just exhausted from keeping track of his lies? Was he really working late, or was he texting Elena? When he smiled at me, was there any part of him that felt guilty about what he was doing? The answer, I was beginning to realize, was no. David felt no guilt because he convinced himself that what he was doing wasn't wrong. In his mind, he was just a man managing two different aspects of his life. He probably told himself that he loved both of us in different ways, that he wasn't hurting anyone as long as we didn't know about each other. David had turned compartmentalization into an art form. But I was about to blow up every wall he'd built between his two worlds. On Wednesday night, Carmen made her first direct move. I casually mentioned that our company conference is coming up, she told me, showing me the message she'd sent to Elena. I said how stressful these events are for the guys in finance, all the pressure to impress clients and partners. Elena immediately responded asking if David would be presenting. What did you say? That I thought so, and that everyone's been talking about how important this presentation is for his career. Then I said something about wishing I had someone to support me through stressful work events like that. It was perfect. Carmen had planted the seed without being obvious about it. She'd made Elena think about showing up to support David without directly suggesting it. Thursday evening, while David was supposedly driving to San Antonio for his weekly client meetings, Elena posted a story on Instagram that made my stomach clench with anticipation and dread. Missing my man already, but so proud of him for working so hard on this big presentation. I just want to wrap him in a hug and tell him how amazing he is. 2 more weeks until his conference. 2 more weeks. Elena was already thinking about the conference, already considering the possibility of being there. Carmen's plan was working. Over the next few days, Jessica continued her careful manipulation. She'd post about the stress of organizing the conference, mention how sweet it was when partners showed up to support their significant others, share articles about the importance of work-life balance in high-pressure careers. Elena was eating it up. She started commenting on Jessica's posts about the conference, asking innocent questions about the venue, the dress code, whether family members were invited. She was building up the nerve to ask if she could surprise David by attending. Meanwhile, I was playing my own role in this elaborate deception. I'd become the most supportive wife in the world, constantly telling David how proud I was of his hard work, how excited I was about his big presentation. I even bought a new dress for the conference, a stunning red number that hugged my curves and made me feel powerful. David complimented the dress when I showed it to him, not realizing he was admiring the outfit I planned to wear when I destroyed his life. "You're going to be the most beautiful woman there," he told me, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that used to make me melt. Now it just made me angry. How dare he pretend to be a loving husband when he was planning to spend the weekend after the conference with another woman? "I just want to support you," I said, meaning it in ways he couldn't imagine. "This presentation is so important for your future." Our future, I used to think. Now I knew better. David didn't have a future with me. He just didn't know it yet. The breakthrough came on a Friday night. Elena had posted a photo of herself getting ready for a date night with David, and Jessica had commented about how lucky she was to have someone so dedicated to work but who still made time for romance. Elena's response was everything we'd been hoping for. "I know I'm so blessed. I just wish I could do more to support him during stressful times like this conference coming up. I've been thinking about surprising him by showing up, but I don't want to distract him if it's really important for his career." Carmen showed me the message with a grin. "She's almost there. She just needs one more push." That push came in the form of Jessica sharing an article about successful couples who supported each other's careers. The article featured interviews with several business executives whose partners had attended important work events, showing up unexpectedly to provide moral support during crucial presentations. Elena shared the article to her own story with the caption, "This is so sweet. Maybe I should surprise Dee at his conference after all. What do you think?" Carmen screenshot the story and showed it to me. "She's going to do it. Elena is going to drive to Austin and surprise David at the conference." I stared at the screenshot, feeling a mixture of triumph and terror. We'd done it. We'd successfully manipulated Elena into walking straight into the trap we'd set for David. But now that the plan was actually working, the reality of what was about to happen hit me like a physical blow. In less than 2 weeks, Elena would drive to Austin expecting to surprise her boyfriend at his big work presentation. She'd probably spend hours getting ready, picking out the perfect outfit, maybe even buying him flowers or a congratulatory gift. She'd be nervous and excited, proud of herself for being so supportive and spontaneous. And then she'd walk into that conference venue and discover that her boyfriend of 3 years was married. She'd see David with his arm around another woman, me, playing the role of devoted wife for all his colleagues and clients to see. She'd realize that everything she thought she knew about their relationship was a lie. Elena was going to be devastated, humiliated, destroyed. And while part of me felt terrible about that, a bigger part of me thought about all the nights I'd lain awake wondering what was wrong with me, why my husband didn't seem interested in me anymore, why our marriage felt like it was slowly dying despite my best efforts to save it. Elena was going to learn the truth about David, finally and completely. And David was going to learn what it felt like to have your entire world exposed as a fraud. In exactly 2 weeks, everything was going to explode. And I was going to be there to watch it happen. The final week before the conference crawled by like a death row inmate counting down to execution. Every interaction with David felt surreal, like I was watching someone else play the role of loving wife while I observed from outside my own body. David was nervous about his presentation in a way I'd never seen before. He practiced in front of the bathroom mirror every morning, ran through his talking points during dinner, even asked me to listen to his pitch and give feedback. Under normal circumstances, I would have been touched by his vulnerability, proud of his dedication. Now, knowing that this presentation was happening in front of both his wife and his girlfriend, his nerves took on a different meaning entirely. "What if I mess up?" he asked me Thursday night, the week before the conference. We were lying in bed, and David was staring at the ceiling with the kind of anxiety that used to make me want to comfort him. "This could make or break my career, Becca. If I screw this up." "You won't," I said automatically, running my fingers through his hair in a gesture that had once been genuine affection and was now pure performance. "You've worked so hard on this. Everyone's going to be impressed." Everyone. Including Elena, who had no idea she was about to walk into a nightmare. "I love you," David said, rolling over to face me. "I know I've been distracted lately, working so much, traveling all the time. But after this conference, things will be different. I promise." The sincerity in his voice almost broke my composure. How could he lie so easily, so convincingly? How could he look at me and promise that things would be different when he was planning to spend the weekend after the conference with another woman? "I love you too," I lied back, and the words felt like ash in my mouth. Meanwhile, Carmen had been monitoring Elena's social media activity like it was her job. Elena was getting more excited by the day, posting stories about shopping for the perfect conference outfit, asking her followers for advice about whether to tell David beforehand or keep it as a complete surprise. The consensus among her followers was clear: surprise him. Show up unexpectedly. It would be so romantic. If only they knew. She bought a new dress, Carmen told me Friday evening, showing me Elena's latest Instagram post. The photo showed a beautiful navy blue dress laid out on Elena's bed, with the caption, "Conference ready. Can't wait to surprise my favorite person at his big presentation. He's going to be so shocked." Shocked didn't begin to cover what David was going to be. "She's planning to drive up Saturday morning," Carmen continued, scrolling through Elena's stories. "The conference starts at 9, but David's presentation isn't until 11:30. She'll have time to find him, maybe grab coffee together, really build up the surprise factor." Perfect. David and I were scheduled to arrive at the venue by 8:30 for the networking breakfast. We'd be there, playing the role of happily married couple, when Elena walked in expecting to surprise her boyfriend. I felt sick thinking about it. Not because I was having second thoughts. David deserved everything that was about to happen to him, but because I kept imagining Elena's face when she realized the truth. The confusion, then the dawning horror, then the complete devastation as she understood that her entire relationship had been built on lies. But Elena wasn't the real victim here, I reminded myself. She was collateral damage in David's elaborate deception. If anything, I was doing her a favor by showing her who David really was before she wasted any more years of her life on him. The weekend before the conference, David went to San Antonio as usual. But this time, instead of the vague client meetings excuse, he told me he was doing a final run-through of his presentation with his team. "We rented a conference room at the hotel," he explained, packing his overnight bag with the same casual efficiency he perfected over 3 years of lying. "Going to practice until we get it perfect." I watched him fold his shirts, wondering if Elena helped him pack when he stayed at her apartment. Did she make him breakfast before he left for his fake business trips? Did she kiss him goodbye and tell him she'd miss him? Did she ever wonder why he couldn't stay longer, why he always had to rush back to Austin on Sunday nights? "Good luck," I told him, meaning it in a way he'd never understand. "I hope everything goes exactly the way you've planned it." Sunday night, David came home in an unusually good mood. His presentation practice had gone well, he said. The team was confident. He was ready for the big day. "How are you feeling about it?" I asked over dinner. "Nervous, but excited." This could change everything for us. Becca. If this goes well, if I get this promotion. He trailed off, but I knew what he wasn't saying. If David got promoted, he'd make more money. He could afford to maintain his double life more easily. Maybe he was even planning to leave me eventually, once his career was secure enough that he could afford the financial hit of a divorce. Well, David was right about one thing. This conference was going to change everything. Monday through Wednesday passed in a blur of final preparations. I got my hair done, my nails painted a bold red that matched my dress. Carmen helped me pick out jewelry and shoes that would photograph well, because I had no doubt that what happened at this conference would end up documented somehow. Are you ready for this? Carmen asked me Wednesday night. She was flying back to Phoenix Thursday morning, her part in our plan complete. Jessica Williams had served her purpose and would disappear from Elena's social media life as quietly as she'd appeared. As ready as someone can be for destroying their husband's life, I guess. Carmen hugged me tight. You know you don't have to go through with this, right? Even now, you could just file for divorce quietly, walk away clean. David would never know you found out about Elena. I'd been thinking about that all week. The easy way out. The mature, adult way of handling infidelity. Just leave. Don't make a scene. Don't humiliate him publicly. Don't drag an innocent woman into the mess David had created. But then I remembered 3 years of lies. 3 years of David coming home to me after spending weekends with another woman. 3 years of him looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me while planning vacations with someone else. 3 years of me questioning myself, wondering what I'd done wrong, why my marriage was failing despite my best efforts to save it. No. David had made his choice when he decided to build a life with another woman while staying married to me. He'd forfeited his right to a quiet, dignified ending to our marriage when he'd spent 3 years treating me like a fool. He deserves what's coming, I told Carmen. And Elena deserves to know the truth. Carmen nodded and squeezed my hand. Then let's give them both exactly what they deserve. Thursday evening, David and I had a quiet dinner at home, our last meal together as a married couple, though only I knew that. David was reviewing his notes one final time, muttering about quarterly projections and market analysis. He seemed genuinely excited about his presentation, proud of the work he'd put into it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Early morning tomorrow, David said as we got ready for bed. I'll be ready, I promised. I wouldn't miss this for the world. And I meant every word. Tomorrow, David Chen was going to learn that actions have consequences. Tomorrow, his perfectly managed double life was going to collapse in the most public, humiliating way possible. Tomorrow, I was going to get my revenge. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Austin day that made you believe anything was possible. I woke up before my alarm, adrenaline coursing through my veins like I'd already had 3 cups of coffee. David was still sleeping, peaceful and relaxed in a way that made me want to shake him awake and scream the truth in his face. Instead, I got up quietly and went through my morning routine. Shower, hair, makeup applied with the precision of someone preparing for battle. The red dress fit perfectly, making me look powerful and confident in a way that felt like armor. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman ready for war. David woke up as I was putting on my earrings. Wow, he said, sitting up in bed and looking at me with genuine appreciation. You look incredible. Thank you. I smiled at him in the mirror, practicing the expression I'd need to maintain for the next few hours. I want to look good for your big day. You always look good. David got out of bed and wrapped his arms around me from behind, and for just a moment, looking at us together in the mirror, we looked like any happily married couple preparing for an important work event. If only it were that simple. We arrived at the conference venue, an upscale hotel in downtown Austin, at exactly 8:30. The networking breakfast was already in full swing, the ballroom filled with David's colleagues and their spouses, potential clients, industry partners. David immediately went into professional mode, shaking hands and making small talk while I played the role of supportive wife, smiling and nodding and complimenting people on their outfits. Rebecca, you look stunning, said Janet Morrison, the wife of David's boss. That color is perfect on you. Thank you. I wanted to look special for David's presentation. I'm so proud of him. The words came easily now. I'd been practicing this performance for weeks, and I was ready for my starring role. At 10:30, people began moving into the main conference room for the morning presentations. David's presentation was scheduled for 11:30, the final slot before lunch. Prime time, he told me proudly. The most important time slot they could have given him. We found seats in the third row, close enough to show David's colleagues that his wife was there to support him, but far enough back that I'd have a clear view of the entire room when Elena arrived. If she arrived. Despite all our planning, despite Elena's social media posts and Carmen's careful manipulation, there was still a chance she'd change her mind at the last minute. Maybe David had told her not to come. Maybe she'd gotten called in to work. Maybe she'd lost her nerve. But at 11:15, just as the presentation before David's was wrapping up, I saw her. Elena Vasquez walked into the conference room looking absolutely beautiful. She was wearing the navy blue dress from her Instagram post, her hair styled in soft waves, carrying a small bouquet of flowers that she was probably planning to give David after his presentation. She looked nervous and excited and proud, scanning the room for her boyfriend. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was it. This was actually happening. Elena spotted David in the front row, where he was sitting with his presentation materials, making last-minute notes. Her face lit up with joy and anticipation. She started making her way toward him, stepping carefully between the chairs, probably planning to surprise him just as he was called up to present. But then Elena saw me. I watched her face change as her eyes tracked from David to the woman sitting next to him, me, clearly positioned as David's companion, wearing an expensive dress and a wedding ring that caught the light as I reached over to squeeze David's shoulder encouragingly. Elena stopped walking. Her face went through a series of expressions, confusion, then dawning realization, then something that looked like physical pain. She understood immediately what she was seeing, even if she didn't want to believe it. David chose that moment to look back at me and smile. "Almost time," he whispered, and I smiled back and mouthed good luck in a way that clearly communicated intimate support. Elena saw the whole exchange. She saw the easy familiarity between us, the wedding rings, the way David's colleagues had been including me in conversation all morning as his wife. She saw 3 years of her life revealed as a complete lie in the span of about 10 seconds. And now, please welcome David Chen from Meridian Financial, presenting on emerging market opportunities in medical device funding. The moderator's voice boomed through the conference room speakers. David stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the podium. The room erupted in polite applause. Elena was still frozen in the aisle, holding her bouquet of flowers, staring at David like she'd never seen him before. Which, in a way, she hadn't. She'd never seen David Chen, married man. She'd only known David Chen, devoted boyfriend who traveled for work. David reached the podium and began his presentation. He was good at it, confident, articulate, commanding the room's attention. Under different circumstances, I would have been genuinely proud of him. But I wasn't watching David. I was watching Elena, who had finally started moving again. Instead of approaching the front of the room, she was backing toward the exit, her face pale and stricken. She was going to leave. She was going to run away without confronting David, without demanding explanations, without making a scene. I couldn't let that happen. I stood up. "Excuse me," I whispered to Janet Morrison, loud enough for several people around us to hear. "I need to step out for just a moment." I made my way toward the aisle where Elena was standing, frozen like a deer in headlights. When I reached her, I spoke quietly but clearly. "You must be Elena." She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. How do you? I'm Rebecca, David's wife." The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena actually stumbled backward, clutching the flowers to her chest like a shield. "That's impossible," she whispered. "David isn't married. We've been together for 3 years. He would have told me. He loves me." "He loves us both," I said, and my voice carried just far enough for the people in the nearby seats to turn and look at us with interest. That's the problem. From the podium, David was hitting his stride, discussing market analysis and profit projections. He had no idea that his two worlds were colliding in the back of the room. Elena's breathing was getting shallow and rapid. She was going into shock, I realized. I need to leave, she said, turning toward the exit. Don't you want to congratulate your boyfriend on his presentation? I asked, my voice carrying a little farther. He worked so hard on it. He'd probably love to see you here. More people were looking now. Conversations were starting in hushed whispers. Janet Morrison was staring at us with undisguised fascination. I don't understand, Elena said, and she sounded like she was about to cry. David said he wasn't married. He said he'd never been married. We were going to get engaged soon. He gave me a promise ring. She held up her right hand, showing me a simple gold band with a small diamond. The promise ring David had given her while he was still wearing his wedding ring at home with me. David says a lot of things, I replied, loud enough now that people throughout the back half of the room were openly staring at us. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Elena looked toward the front of the room, where David was building to his presentation's climax, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding behind him. Then she looked back at me, and I saw the exact moment when shock transformed into rage. David! Elena called out, her voice cutting across the room like a knife. Every head in the conference room turned toward us. David, mid-sentence at the podium, stopped talking and looked up with confusion. David! Elena called again, louder this time, starting to walk toward the front of the room. We need to talk. The entire room went silent. 200 industry professionals and their spouses turned to watch as Elena Vasquez, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing a beautiful blue dress, marched toward the podium where David Chen stood frozen with his PowerPoint remote in his hand. Elena! David's voice came through the microphone, amplified for the entire room to hear. What are you? How are you here? I came to surprise you. Elena's voice was getting higher, more emotional. Your coworker Jessica told me about your big presentation, and I wanted to support you. But imagine my surprise when I discovered that your wife was already here. She pointed directly at me. Every person in that room turned to look at me, then back at David, then back at Elena, putting together the story in real time. David's face went white. He looked at Elena, then at me, then at his boss in the front row who was staring at him with undisguised shock and disapproval. Elena, I can explain. Explain what? Elena had reached the front of the room now, close enough to the microphone that her voice was echoing through the speakers. Explain how you've been lying to me for 3 years. Explain how you told me you loved me while you were married to someone else. Explain how you gave me a promise ring while you were wearing a wedding ring with her. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. People were pulling out their phones, some clearly recording the scene unfolding before them. David looked like he was going to be sick. Elena, please, not here. Let's talk about this privately. Privately. Elena laughed, a sound that was equal parts hysteria and rage. Like how you privately maintained 2 relationships for 3 years. Like how you privately told me we were going to get married while you were already married. She turned to address the room, her voice shaking with emotion but carrying clearly through the microphone system. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet David Chen, who is apparently so good at managing accounts that he managed to maintain 2 serious relationships simultaneously for 3 years without either woman knowing about the other. The room was in chaos now. People were openly staring, phones were recording, and David's boss was making his way toward the podium with an expression that promised serious career consequences. David tried one more time to regain control of the situation. Elena, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years. Elena cut him off. She turned to look directly at me. Did you know about me? I found out recently, I said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. That's when I hired a private investigator. More gasps. More phone cameras pointed in our direction. David looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Well, Rebecca, I guess we both learned something today about the man we loved. She dropped the bouquet of flowers at David's feet and walked out of the conference room with as much dignity as she could muster. The room stayed silent for about 10 seconds after she left. Then the whispers started again, building to a buzz of conversation that made it impossible for David to continue his presentation even if he'd been capable of doing so. His boss reached the podium. I think we need to take a break, he announced into the microphone. David, my office, Monday morning, 8 a.m. And that was how David Chen's carefully managed double life exploded in front of 200 of his professional colleagues, destroying his career, his marriage, and his relationship with Elena in the span of about 5 minutes. I sat back down in my seat and waited for the chaos to die down, feeling strangely calm for someone who had just orchestrated the complete destruction of her husband's life. It was over. Finally, it was over. The ride home from the conference was the longest 25 minutes of my life. David drove in complete silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. I stared out the passenger window, watching Austin blur past, feeling strangely disconnected from what had just happened. We were two people who had shared a bed for 8 years, who had built a life together, who had promised to love each other until death do us part. And now we couldn't even look at each other. David pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of us moved to get out of the car. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, David spoke. How long have you known? His voice was hoarse, defeated. This wasn't the smooth-talking David who had explained away every lie, every inconsistency, every moment when I'd suspected something was wrong. This was a man who had just watched his entire world collapse in public. Months, I said. I hired a private investigator in January. January. David closed his eyes. That was 5 months ago. You've known for 5 months and you said nothing. Like you said nothing for 3 years. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Rebecca, I need you to understand. What? I turned to face him for the first time since we'd left the hotel. What do you need me to understand, David? That you love us both? That you never meant for this to happen? That it just got complicated? It did get complicated. David's voice was pleading now, desperate. Elena was never supposed to be. I never meant to fall in love with her. Fall in love with her. There it was, the truth I'd been avoiding even in my own mind. David hadn't just been having an affair. He'd fallen in love with another woman while married to me. When? I asked. When did you fall in love with her? David was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, about 2 years ago. Maybe longer. 2 years. He'd been in love with Elena for 2 years while coming home to me, sleeping next to me, making plans for our future together. Did you ever love me? The question came out as a whisper. Or was our entire marriage just a lie? Of course I loved you. I still love you. David reached toward me, then let his hand fall when he saw me pull away. Rebecca, you have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every day for 3 years, you hurt me. Every time you lied about where you were, every time you came home from being with her and kissed me hello, every time you told me you loved me while you were planning a future with someone else. David started crying then. Actual tears, running down his face as he sat in our driveway in his conference suit. I know I hurt you. But I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to choose. Choose. The word came out sharp enough to cut. You didn't have to choose, David. You were married. The choice was already made. It wasn't that simple. Yes, it was. I opened the car door, suddenly desperate to get away from him, from his tears and his excuses and his explanations. It was exactly that simple. You were married to me. Everything else was a choice you made. I got out of the car and walked toward our house. My house, now, I supposed. David followed me, still trying to explain, to justify, to make me understand why he destroyed our marriage for another woman. Rebecca, please. Can we talk about this? Can we try to work through this? I stopped at our front door and turned to face him. Work through this? David, you've been living a double life for 3 years. You have an entire relationship with another woman. You told her you loved her. You gave her a promise ring. You took her on trips using our money. You lied to me every single day. I can end it with Elena. I can choose you. I want to choose you. The sincerity in his voice almost made me laugh. You can't choose me now, David. You already made your choice. 3 years ago, when you started seeing Elena. 2 years ago, when you fell in love with her. Every day since then, when you decided to keep lying to both of us. I unlocked the front door and walked inside, David right behind me. Our house looked the same as when we'd left that morning. Coffee cups in the sink, Benny's toys scattered across the living room floor, the Saturday paper still folded on the kitchen counter. But everything felt different now. This wasn't our home anymore. It was just a house where 2 strangers happened to live. What do you want me to do? David asked. Tell me what you want me to do to fix this. I turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since the conference. David looked exhausted, defeated, older somehow. His hair was messed up from running his hands through it, his tie was crooked, and there were stress lines around his eyes that I'd never noticed before. He looked like a man whose life had just been destroyed. Which, I supposed, it had. I want you to pack a bag and leave, I said. Tonight. I want you to go stay at a hotel or with a friend or wherever you want to go, but I want you out of this house. Rebecca. I want you to call Elena and apologize to her for 3 years of lies. I want you to tell her the truth about everything, about our marriage, about how long you've been lying to both of us, about every single thing you've kept from her. David winced. She won't take my calls. She blocked my number before she even left the hotel. Good for Elena. At least one of us had some dignity left. I want you to call your parents and tell them what you did. I want you to explain to them why their daughter-in-law won't be coming to family dinners anymore. My parents don't need to know the details. Your parents deserve to know that their son is a liar and a cheater. Just like Elena deserved to know you were married. Just like I deserved to know you were having an affair. David slumped against the kitchen counter like a puppet whose strings had been cut. And then what? After I've destroyed every relationship I have left, then what? Then you figure out how to live with the consequences of your choices. I walked past him toward the stairs. I'm going to change clothes. I want you gone when I come back downstairs. Where am I supposed to go? I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at him one more time. I don't know, David. Maybe you can call Elena and ask if you can stay with her. Oh wait, you destroyed that relationship too. I went upstairs and closed our bedroom door behind me. Through the window, I could see neighbors in their yards, probably returning from Saturday errands, completely unaware that the couple next door had just imploded in spectacular fashion. I changed out of my red conference dress and into jeans and a t-shirt, hanging the dress carefully in the closet. Someday, maybe I'd want to remember this day. Or maybe I'd donate it to charity and try to forget. When I came back downstairs 20 minutes later, David was gone. He'd packed a suitcase and left his house key on the kitchen counter, next to a handwritten note that said, I'm sorry. I love you. I'll call you in a few days when you've had time to process everything. Process everything. Like 3 years of betrayal was something I could just work through with a little time and space. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and Benny curled up next to me, and I tried to figure out what I was supposed to feel. Relief, satisfaction, grief, anger. All of it, I realized. I felt all of it at once, a complicated mess of emotions that would probably take months or years to sort through completely. But underneath all the complicated feelings was something simpler and cleaner. I felt free. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't wondering where my husband really was. I wasn't questioning whether he was telling me the truth. I wasn't lying awake at night trying to figure out what was wrong with our marriage, what I had done to make him lose interest in me, why the man I loved felt so distant and distracted. I knew the truth now. All of it. And the truth, as devastating as it was somehow easier to live with than the uncertainty had been. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be David trying to explain or apologize again. But it was from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Rebecca, this is Elena. I got your number from the private investigator you hired. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "When and where?" "Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop called Radio on Barton Springs Road. 10 a.m. I'll be there." I spent Sunday morning getting ready to meet the woman who had unknowingly shared my husband for 3 years. I had no idea what Elena wanted to talk about, what she might say to me, how this conversation would go. Were we going to blame each other? Compare notes about David's lies? Bond over our shared betrayal? Elena was already at Radio when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She looked different than she had at the conference. Older, more tired, like she'd aged years in the past 24 hours. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup to hide the evidence that she'd been crying. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "How are you holding up?" Elena laughed, but it was a sound without any humor in it. "I've been better. Yesterday was the worst day of my life. But I needed to talk to you. I needed to apologize." "Apologize?" I was genuinely surprised. "Elena, you don't have anything to apologize for. You didn't know David was married." "But I should have known." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. Looking back now, there were so many signs. The way he was only available certain days of the week. How he never wanted me to come to Austin to visit him. The way he was vague about his work, his friends, his life here. "David is very good at lying," I said. "He had me fooled for years too." "But you're his wife. You had a right to trust him." I was just some woman who fell for a married man's lies." The pain in Elena's voice was raw, fresh, devastating. She wasn't just dealing with the end of a relationship, she was dealing with the realization that the relationship had never been real in the first place. "Elena, you were not just some woman. You were a victim of David's lies, same as me. He told you he loved you, right? He made promises about your future together." Elena nodded, tears starting to flow again. "He said we were going to get married. He said as soon as his career was more stable, we'd start planning a wedding. I've been saving money for a dress, for our honeymoon. I even started looking at apartments in Austin because I thought I might move here to be closer to him." My heart broke for her. Elena had been planning a future with David while I was trying to save my marriage with him. Both of us had been investing in relationships that were built on lies. "I keep thinking about all the times he told me he loved me," Elena continued. "Was any of it real? Or was I just something to do on weekends when he was bored with his real life?" "I've been wondering the same thing about my marriage," I admitted. 8 years together, and I don't know anymore what was real and what was performance." We sat in silence for a few minutes, 2 women trying to make sense of how thoroughly one man had deceived us both. Finally, Elena asked, "What are you going to do now? Are you going to try to work things out with him?" "No." The answer came immediately, with a certainty that surprised even me. "David made his choice 3 years ago when he started seeing you. Every day since then, he's chosen to keep lying to both of us. I can't build a marriage with someone who's capable of that level of deception." Elena nodded like that made sense to her. I keep thinking I should hate you, she said. You're the reason he couldn't be with me completely. You're why he had to lie, why he could only give me part of himself. And I keep thinking I should hate you, I replied. You're the woman my husband fell in love with while he was married to me. But we don't hate each other, do we? No, we don't. Because how could we hate each other? Elena and I were both victims of the same man's selfishness. We'd both loved someone who didn't exist. The David I thought I was married to, the David Elena thought she was dating. The real David was someone who could maintain 2 relationships simultaneously for 3 years without feeling enough guilt to stop. I have something that belongs to you, Elena said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small jewelry box and placed it on the table between us. I opened the box. Inside was the promise ring David had given her, the simple gold band with a small diamond that she'd shown me at the conference. I can't keep it, Elena said. It feels like evidence of a crime now. I stared at the ring, thinking about all the jewelry David had bought over the years. For me, for Elena, probably for other women I didn't even know about. How many times had he stood in jewelry stores, picking out gifts for his wife and his girlfriend, managing his lies with the same efficiency he brought to his work. Keep it, I said, closing the box and pushing it back toward Elena. Or sell it. Or throw it in the lake. Do whatever feels right to you. What feels right is giving it back to the man who gave it to me and telling him exactly what I think of him and his promises. Have you talked to him? Since yesterday. Elena shook her head. I blocked his number, his email, all his social media accounts. I don't want to hear his explanations or his apologies. There's nothing David could say that would make any of this better. I understood that impulse. Part of me wanted to block David out of my life completely, to pretend the past 8 years had never happened, to start over with a clean slate. But David and I had legal entanglements, a house, joint bank accounts, shared debts. I couldn't just disappear from his life the way Elena could. I'm filing for divorce, I told her. My lawyer says it should be straightforward since I have evidence of the affair. Will you ask for alimony? Make him pay for what he did? The question surprised me. I hadn't thought about divorce in terms of punishment, just in terms of ending a marriage that had been built on lies. I don't want David's money, I said. I just want to be free of him. Elena smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. You're a better person than I am. If I were married to him, I'd take him for everything he had. We talked for another hour, sharing stories about David's lies, comparing the different versions of himself he presented to each of us. Elena's David was romantic and attentive, always planning special dates and surprise getaways. My David was steady and reliable, focused on building a stable life together. Neither version was complete. They were both carefully curated performances designed to give each of us what David thought we wanted. When we finally said goodbye, Elena hugged me tight. Thank you, she said, for exposing him yesterday, for giving me the truth, even though it hurt. I would have wasted years more of my life on him if you hadn't done what you did. Thank you for not hating me, I replied, for understanding that we were both victims in this. Maybe we can be friends, Elena said, after we've both had time to heal from this mess. I think I'd like that. I thought I'd like that too. Elena seemed like the kind of person I would have chosen as a friend under different circumstances. It felt like a small victory, finding something positive in the wreckage David had left behind. That afternoon, I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed on my house. I opened a new bank account and transferred half of our savings into it. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney for the following week. I updated my emergency contacts at work to remove David's name. Piece by piece, I began the process of untangling my life from his. David called that evening while I was cooking dinner for one. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message while I ate. Rebecca, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we can work through this. I love you. I chose you. I ended things with Elena. We can start over. Put this behind us. Please, just call me back. I deleted the message without responding. David had spent 3 years making choices, choosing to lie, choosing to cheat, choosing to build a life with another woman while staying married to me. Now it was my turn to make a choice. I chose myself. I chose the truth. I chose freedom. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. 6 months after the conference, my divorce from David was finalized on a rainy Tuesday morning in downtown Austin. I sat in the courtroom wearing a simple black dress, listening to the judge officially dissolve 8 years of marriage in about 10 minutes of legal language. David wasn't there. His lawyer represented him, reading from a statement about mutual incompatibility and irreconcilable differences. No mention of Elena. No mention of 3 years of lies. Just legal boilerplate that made our divorce sound like any other failed marriage where 2 people simply grew apart. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. The months leading up to the divorce had been a blur of paperwork, mediation sessions, and the exhausting process of separating 2 lives that had been intertwined for nearly a decade. We sold the house in Cedar Park. I couldn't afford to keep it on my own, and besides, it held too many memories of the life I'd thought we were building together. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in South Austin, close enough to work that I could bike there on pretty days. David, I learned through our lawyers, had moved to Dallas. His company had given him a choice after the conference incident: resign quietly or be terminated for conduct unbecoming of a company representative. David chose resignation, which at least allowed him to find a new job without having to explain why he'd been fired. He was working for a smaller firm now, making less money, probably telling his new colleagues some carefully edited version of why he'd left his previous position. I felt no satisfaction in David's professional downfall. His career troubles were just collateral damage from the explosion he'd created. What mattered was that he was facing consequences for his choices, maybe for the first time in his adult life. Elena and I had kept in touch, as unlikely as that would have seemed 6 months earlier. We texted occasionally, sharing updates about our healing process, our therapy sessions, our attempts to rebuild our lives after David's deception. She'd left San Antonio, taking a nursing job in Colorado where she could start fresh without constant reminders of the 3 years she'd spent loving a man who didn't exist. I'm seeing someone, she texted me in early spring. Nothing serious yet, but he's honest. Refreshingly, obviously honest. Sometimes I think David broke my ability to trust people, but maybe I'm healing faster than I thought. I was happy for Elena. She deserved someone who would love her completely, openly, without lies or compartmentalization or carefully managed schedules. She deserved the kind of relationship she'd thought she had with David. My own journey back to trusting people was slower, more complicated. I'd started therapy a month after David moved out, working with a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma. Dr. Sarah Kim helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just infidelity, it was systematic emotional abuse through deception. David didn't just cheat on you, Dr. Kim explained during one of our early sessions. He created an elaborate false reality and convinced you to live in it for 3 years. That level of gaslighting and manipulation takes a toll on your ability to trust your own perceptions. She was right. 4 months after the conference, I second-guessed everything. When friends told me they were happy to see me doing well post-divorce, I wondered if they were lying to spare my feelings. When my boss praised my work, I questioned whether she really meant it or was just being kind to someone going through a difficult time. When the barista at my local coffee shop remembered my order, I found myself wondering if he was just doing his job or if there was some ulterior motive. David had trained me to doubt my own instincts, to accept explanations that didn't quite add up, to prioritize keeping peace over seeking truth. Learning to trust myself again was harder than learning to trust other people. But gradually, with Dr. Kim's help and a lot of work, I started to feel like myself again. The real myself, not the version of Rebecca that David had needed me to be to make his double life work. I remembered that I was funny, something I'd forgotten during those last years with David, when every conversation felt loaded with potential landmines. I remembered that I was social, that I enjoyed meeting new people and trying new things. I remembered that I was strong, capable of handling whatever life threw at me. I also remembered that I was allowed to be angry. For the first few months after David left, I tried to be mature about everything. I told friends and family that we were divorcing because we'd grown apart, that sometimes relationships just run their course. I'd been diplomatic in mediation, reasonable about dividing assets, gracious about David's attempts to maintain relationships with people who had been our mutual friends. But in therapy, Dr. Kim helped me understand that anger was not only natural but necessary. David had stolen 3 years of my life through his lies. He'd made me question my worth, my intuition, my reality. He'd exposed me to emotional and potentially physical health risks through his affair. He'd violated every promise he'd made to me on our wedding day. I had every right to be furious about that. Once I gave myself permission to feel angry, really angry, the healing process accelerated. I stopped making excuses for David's behavior, stopped trying to understand his motivations, stopped caring about whether he was suffering consequences for his choices. David had made his bed. Now he could lie in it. Alone. The 1-year anniversary of the conference came and went without fanfare. I spent that day hiking at Zilker Park with Carmen, who had flown in from Phoenix for the weekend. "Any regrets?" she asked as we sat by the lake, watching kayakers navigate the calm water. I thought about it seriously. Did I regret hiring the private investigator? Did I regret orchestrating David's public humiliation? Did I regret destroying Elena's relationship along with my marriage? No, I said finally. David spent 3 years managing his lies very carefully, making sure he never had to face real consequences. Someone needed to force him to be honest, even if he couldn't do it himself. And Elena. Elena deserved the truth. She would have figured it out eventually. David was getting careless, taking bigger risks. Better that she found out when she was 34 and could still rebuild her life than when she was 44 with kids and a mortgage. Carmen nodded approvingly. You did the right thing. It was brutal, but it was right. That night, Carmen and I went to dinner at a new restaurant in East Austin, the kind of place David never would have wanted to try. Too trendy, too loud, too unpredictable. We ordered dishes we'd never heard of and drank wine that cost more than David would have thought was reasonable. So what's next? Carmen asked over dessert. Dating? Travel? A complete career change? All of the above, maybe. I've been thinking about going back to school, getting my MBA. I never did that because David thought it was unnecessary, that his career was advancing fast enough to support both of us. David thought a lot of things, Carmen said dryly. Most of them wrong. I laughed. David thought a lot of things that were convenient for David. There's a difference. After Carmen flew back to Phoenix, I spent a quiet Sunday at home, thinking about the past year and what I wanted for the next one. I'd survived the worst betrayal I could imagine. I'd rebuilt my life from scratch. I'd learned to trust myself again, to believe in my own worth, to understand that David's lies were about his character, not mine. I was ready for whatever came next. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart rate spiked. After everything with David, unexpected messages still made me nervous. But this one was different. Hi Rebecca, this is Marcus Rodriguez. We met at your company's networking event last month. I hope this isn't too forward, but I was wondering if you'd like to get coffee sometime. No pressure if you're not interested. I just enjoyed our conversation and thought you might like to continue it. I remembered Marcus. He was a graphic designer who just moved to Austin from Portland, funny and easy to talk to, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. We'd chatted for maybe 20 minutes at the networking event, nothing romantic, just two professionals getting to know each other. But I remembered thinking that under different circumstances, in a different phase of my life, I might have been interested in getting to know him better. Maybe I was ready for different circumstances. I texted back, Hi Marcus. I'd love to get coffee. When works for you? His response came back almost immediately. How about Tuesday after work? There's a place called Radio on Barton Springs Road that's supposed to be great. Radio. The same coffee shop where Elena and I had met to compare notes about David's lies. For a second, I hesitated. Did I want to associate that place with a potential new beginning? Then I realized that reclaiming spaces David and his deception had touched was part of moving forward. Radio wasn't Elena's and my place of shared trauma. It could be the place where I had my first post-divorce coffee date. Tuesday at radio sounds perfect, I texted back. Looking forward to it. And I was looking forward to it. For the first time in over a year, I was excited about the possibility of getting to know someone new. Not because I needed a relationship to validate me or complete me, but because I was finally whole enough on my own to share that wholeness with someone else. I'd learned something important over the past year. The opposite of betrayal isn't revenge, though revenge can be satisfying. The opposite of betrayal is living authentically, refusing to let someone else's lies define your reality, building a life that's entirely your own. David had tried to make me a supporting character in his elaborate deception. But I'd written myself back into the starring role of my own story. And this time, I was going to write a better ending. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for being witness to my journey from betrayal to healing, from lies to truth, from revenge to redemption. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, know that you can survive it. You can rebuild. You can learn to trust again, yourself first, then others. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you can turn your greatest devastation into your greatest transformation. The comment section is always here if you need to share your own story, or if you just need someone to tell you that you're stronger than you know. Because you are. Trust me on that one. I learned it the hard way.